Well, hey guys, welcome back to the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Holmes, host for this episode and a member of the Black Doctoral Network. Well, like every other interview that I do, I have brought to you a wonderful, stupendous, outrageous, magnificent, extraordinary, intelligent guest. And this person is in the body of the one and only Dr. Kalinda Ukanwa. This is an extraordinary young woman. Who is Dr. Ukanwa? She is an assistant professor of marketing at the University of Southern California, but that's not it, guys. She's also a quantitative modeler and an expert. I said expert in artificial intelligence. She's going to tell you a whole lot more about what she does, way better than I can. So welcome, Dr. Ukanwa.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Dr. Holmes.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this interview and really enlighten us on the work that you do and the journey that you've taken to get here. So let's just start off with the first question. Where does it all begin for you?
Well, let me start off by saying that I just recently learned this term. I don't know how long it's been around, but I am African. So some people are probably wondering, Ukanwa, where's that from? So my mother is African-American. In fact, has her family, her side of family has been here since the mid 1700s, typical in many ways through slavery on up to now. My father is Igbo from Nigeria. But for anybody who's from Nigeria out there, I got to cop to it. I don't know anything about Igbo culture, Nigerian culture. Do not ask. I'm culturally 100% African-American. And so my entire life has been here, born in Colorado, lived in 5 different states before the age of 13. So I moved around quite a bit. But ultimately, my family settled in California since from 13 on, Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area. Went to high school there, went to college there. I went to Stanford University as an undergrad and graduate in industrial engineering. And that's where my love for quantitative modeling, analytics, use of data began. I really love that background. It's really an industrial engineering operations research degree for those who might be familiar. If you're not familiar with that, that's basically the people who are thought of as efficiency experts or wait time experts or process improvement experts. My first job after those 2 degrees, it was a combined program where I got my bachelor's and master's. I came out and worked for Walt Disney. I was in the industrial engineering group in Walt Disney, which was basically a central consulting group that provided industrial engineering support for the attractions business. So I worked in Orlando, Florida for almost 4 years, supporting the rides, the hotels, the resorts, and then ultimately new theme parks at the time. And then I continued on in this analytics vein for the rest of my career. Since after Walt Disney, I worked for Citibank. I worked for, I did do a 2-year stint coming back to Stanford to get an MBA. But I've also worked for the TSA, which is, the Transportation Security Administration. I worked for Viacom. All of these were in what were analytics roles, but more in the finance part of those companies. So financial planning and analytics. And that has been a continued theme, working with data, making decisions in support of companies and organizations. One of the things that I learned as I went along in that path is that with data, models, analytics, they can produce different outputs depending on what socio-demographic group you're on. So if you happen to be African-American, for example, as opposed to white, Caucasian American, that you can have some kind of model produce an outcome that's a decision about you that would be different just because you're in 2 different races. Think about, for example, a decision about whether to give you a loan or not. And so that's where, within my role working in these companies, where I would see these kind of different outputs, these different decisions based on data and models, which are supposed to be objective, supposed to be not biased, it became puzzling, mathematical. It should be, it's based on the math. That led to my interest in my current research. At one point, I decided to leave corporate America and pursue my PhD and pursue a career of research. So I got involved with the PhD project. So for PhD project alums, shout out to you all. But this is an organization, if you're not familiar, that's geared towards getting more underrepresented minorities, which means Black, Hispanic, Native American scholars into the PhD life, encourage them to come to PhDs and specifically for businesses. So business scholars and business schools. So I got involved with that. Then I ultimately pursued a PhD at the University of Maryland, College Park. Completed that with a PhD in quantitative marketing. I'm in specifically the marketing field within business scholarship. And the reason why I pursued marketing instead of many people said, why not finance? If you had a career in finance, was I wanted to apply analytics to problems where the firm is interfacing with consumers, because that's where my interest is, interfacing you and me and us. Finished that and with the focus being on algorithmic bias and algorithmic fairness, which is basically looking at how can we make artificial intelligence, and I'm including in that analytics models, how do we make those fair to everyone in terms of those outputs, those decisions? If two people, one who's Black and one who's white, are applying for a loan and they both have, for example, credit score 750, they should, and if that's the qualifying metric to get a loan, they should both get a loan. There shouldn't be any difference because one is Black and one is white, which sometimes does happen. So my focus is on why do these models sometimes produce unfair outcomes or biased outcomes? What can be done to fix these models, this artificial intelligence? And what are some of the downstream consequences if they are biased to consumers, to civilians, to citizens of the world? That's my research focus, and I look at it in a quantitative way, and I tend to look at it for what's the impact on consumers and what's the impact on decisions for firms. And so that's been the focus of my research. I got hired in 2019 at University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business, and that's where I've been since. I teach marketing analytics, but my passion is in research on this topic because I do feel personally this is one of the 21st century social justice issues of our time. There's there's not enough focus on these the algorithms, how they're structured, because once they're set in and baked in, it's going to be very hard to reverse that. And so now's the time to get under the hood and figure out how to fix these things so that if they're going to be making decisions about us that might impact our lives, that we get fair decisions.
So you have sparked so many questions in my head. So let's just start with this first one. So when you got into, I'll call this the second part of your professional life, how many people were at these tables and in these groups that mirrored your race, your sex, your gender?
Hardly any. I was so often the only one in the room.
Wow. And how do you walk into a room and there is no commonality? What do you say to yourself in order to be confident, make sure your voice is heard, and also fight? Because you're there. When you get there, you realize, now I'm in a fight. I didn't know I was coming to a fight, but now I am. So tell me about that thought process, the modes of emotional strength you have to display in order to be in those places.
Yeah. Some of that, that's a great question. And since you had just a moment ago asked me about where did I come from with my background, it just suddenly occurred to me. Some of that is rooted in the fact that I was the kid who was constantly moving into new spaces, constantly being the new person, at least up until the age of 13, the new person, had to figure my way through a new situation. And it's just occurred to me, I think that has probably helped me in those situations where now I'm the I'm not necessarily the new kid, but the only one, and
Yeah.
navigating those situations. So I think it's come from a long period of having that experience. Having a mother, my mother, most of my life it's been a single mom since my parents divorced pretty early on, who was very, very supportive, and me, my brother, my sister pursuing things that pursuing avenues that were typically didn't have many of us. My brother is an electrical engineer. My sister is a physician. I mean, we are often in these places where we were the only one, and she was like the wind. Sounds corny, but the wind beneath our wings in terms of saying, you know what, baby, you just keep going. You do you. Don't listen to those people telling you can't, because I know you can. So I think that helped quite a bit. I think learning how to, because I would, all of us, but I was in a predominantly white institution, Stanford, very early on, and then to some extent my high school, and the kind of classes that are those advanced classes, AP classes, honors classes, again, the only one. So that was like early training to just be in a space where you're the only one and just keep pushing through despite the naysayers, to do what you can do, because you've done it. And so
I mean, and you're obviously very intelligent. I mean, you've gone to Stanford.
Thank you.
I mean, you have this PhD, and likely in a field that many people don't even go into. You have this engineering background, this quantitative, not just quant people. This is some math. These are numbers. This lady is very, very, very strategic in the way that she's able to think. And now you're teaching. You're back in California teaching. Now, yes. Tell me this. Who are your students? What do your students look like?
So I teach graduate students. My class is my marketing analyst class is a combination of mostly MBA students and MS and business analytics students. By far, the majority are Asian.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And so when we have the conversation of fixing the problem, what do you believe is one of the solutions? I'm sure there are several, but what is one of the solutions that we can really start tackling this bias in artificial intelligence and in these models that somebody is creating that's thinking for us?
So how do we tackle it given the kind of students that I have?
Well, how do we tackle it from the students that you have? That's one angle. And then how do you tackle it from your current position?
Yeah. So there's two ways that I do this. So teaching is an opportunity. It really is, I think many of my colleagues sometimes, or many colleagues within the field in general, think of teaching as this thing you have to do, but it's also an opportunity to share your knowledge and research and hopefully change minds, even at that stage, because especially with the graduate students, they're there to learn to become future leaders in their domains, right? Managers and up. So quite often they're training to be decision makers, and so that's one way to tackle it. I like to incorporate, in addition to the traditional typical topics that are taught in marketing analytics, I like to incorporate a theme throughout, as well as sections of my class devoted to these topics of fairness, limitations of algorithms, things that these are not the end all be all. And so often people think, oh, well, the math said it's so it must be true, right? Or the statistics said it's so it must be true, without any kind of critical thinking about what does it mean and what does it not mean, what does it represent and what does it not represent. So I like to bring that thing to the classes and actually expose people to the topic of algorithmic fairness and bias, which many people have never even heard of, had never even thought about. In my research, was just the other big chunk of my life. In fact, that's probably more so than even teaching. I like to tackle it through the research that I'm doing. So, for example, I have a paper that I'm working on now that looks at under what conditions is it beneficial and not for a firm to the firms that are out there that are using algorithms that may be biased, when is it beneficial to have a third-party institution that is going to be monitoring this stuff? A great example is Timnit Gebru, who went through this tumultuous time at Google. She was a leader in looking at keeping algorithms fair and unbiased at Google, but was recently pushed out. And there were some concerns that she was pushed out because she was too vocal about unfair or biased algorithms within Google. So she has announced that she is building an institution that's going to be outside of these big companies, that will be developed a nonprofit institution to monitor algorithms and report out about bias, and let the population know. So this particular paper is looking at, because firms often are like scared of that. They're like, we don't want any auditors. We don't want people looking at it. We'll solve it ourselves, stay out. But I find conditions mathematically, I'm doing this from a quantitative standpoint, that show that firms can actually benefit from this. If your AI technology or your algorithms are truly not biased, maybe these things are not perfect, they'll make mistakes, but if they're truly not biased, then a third party firm is going to let people know, and that's actually going to improve your reputation.
Yeah.
And then if it is biased, well, it's going to let people know. But that hopefully will be an incentive for firms to turn inward and say, okay, we really need to fix this. We really need to address this, if nothing else, so that it doesn't impact our reputation.
Yeah. And
there's no outside incentive as it is today for firms to do that. So, that's the kind of research that I'm looking at, which has policy implications along with firms. It's one of my papers.
That's powerful work. Now, I truly believe in what you just said. Being at higher ed, I love to teach, but I also love research, because that is like our baby, right? That's what we came to do. And so,
yes,
one of the great things about research, it does put the information out there, but sometimes it doesn't put it in the hands of people that need to hear this, right?
Yeah.
So we do research and we share it with other people in the field that love what we're doing. But in terms of a layperson, that really needs to understand that there may be bias as a consumer towards me because of these algorithms that are being created. How do we continue to push the message out to a broader audience?
Yeah, this has been much on my mind too, because sometimes I feel like I'm a evangelist about this topic. I feel like I'm objective about it, but I feel very passionate about this topic too. So I think the best way to get it out to people who are not academics, talking the academic talk, sometimes it's forums like this, where I've spent part of my time giving talks, participating webinars, participating in creation. There was one person who I've connected with who is creating this knowledge base that is geared towards high schoolers about topics that are not so accessible and not taught in high school. And so I had the pleasure of giving her some content that she included as part of that body of knowledge that is geared towards high schoolers, and breaking things down so that somebody who doesn't have a PhD in quantitative modeling can see and understand and see how they can get involved. I think that's super important. What's the point of doing research if nobody's going to read it? What's the point of research if five other people who are in the same space reads it? I very much came into the world of academia not to write papers, but to make an impact.
Yeah.
To really make an impact. And so that's about something that's important. So that's very important to me.
I think one of the biggest things too is representation. I know when I was younger, there were so many things I did not know that were out there in terms of careers until I met people who told me what they did for a living. I was like, I didn't know that was a real job. And it even was more powerful when I saw somebody doing the work and they looked like me. So imagine there's somebody out there, a young girl who's watching this interview, and she sees you and hears about the work that you're doing. What would you say to her to encourage her that if you want this, you can get it, but these are maybe the steps you need to take to make it happen?
Yeah, that resonates with me because I have a 10-year-old daughter, and not too long ago we had kind of a conversation like that. So for those who are out there, and we need a whole lot more of us out there, people who look like us, we need a whole lot more in this space because it doesn't impact us. We need people who understand the potential impact, but also who understand how to understand the space to be involved. I would say that's for anybody young who's interested in this. It's important to I mean, if you haven't gone to college yet, it's important to keep up with the studies, focus on school, so that you're doing well. Don't let folks around you, this happened to me, say to you, why are you so focused on that? Are you an Oreo? Why do you focused on learning? You should be doing all this stuff. So I would have to say you would have to stay strong because you may be at this point in time in our culture, in our society, one of a few or the only one. I hope that in the days, in the future, that would no longer be the case, and that would not be a surprise to see a black face or brown face, in these technology spaces. But I would say, focus on that, lift the muscles around, in specifically this space, your math. Don't be intimidated by it. Don't feel like it's only those super, super smart people from certain ethnic groups can do it. I can't do it. Don't let anybody tell you any different, because I can't tell you how many brilliant, brilliant people I've come across who happen to be Black, who are told and discouraged again and again, you can't do this, when in fact they mentally have the ability to do this. So that's what I would say to young folks. And then when those who are in college, consider and explore the idea of academia. This is not something that's often brought up to us while we're in college. Nobody ever talked to me about it, but it's interesting how many people who are fellow PhD students that I went through my PhD program said, oh yeah, a professor came to me and said, would you be interested in this, and talk to me about it. But those who look like us, I hardly ever hear any of them say that happened to them. So it's consider a life in academia. Some people say, oh, you can't get paid. There's ways to get paid in that. And consider, in college, to kind of wet your toes in it by doing some research with somebody who knows how to do it, volunteering.
Yeah. And I think what you said was important just then, is putting yourself out there, because oftentimes the invite may not come to you.
Yes.
I was never invited to be a part of research teams. Although I know I could have done a great job. I was never asked, have you ever considered being a professor? But I know I could have done it. So I just said, hey, I'm thinking about being a professor. What are the steps I need to take? I want to do research. How can I be a part of a research team? Advocate for yourself, because if you are confident in your abilities, sometimes the intimidation is real because of who you are, what you look like. And so the offer may not come.
That's right. That's right. And so how did you end up getting into the world of, research and PhDs then?
I put myself out there. I started at the bottom. I took some adjunct positions because I love to teach, but I knew just getting my name on the roster and getting that title was going to lead me into being a professor at a high level doing some research.
Yes.
So, you got to take those steps. You got to be strategic sometimes. And it may take a little bit longer than you want, but it can still happen for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that you said that I do want to touch on a little bit is that you said in this digital space that we're in right now, it is another avenue of equity that we're fighting for, this social justice. And I love that you said that, because I don't think people really have actualized that we're under attack in multiple facets.
That's right.
Being one of them. So talk a little bit about that angle.
Yeah, so this is again, I think this is one of the 21st century social justice issues of our time that we really need to keep the eye on. Let me use some examples, but algorithms ultimately in many spaces are used to either make decisions about us or will be used to manage what we see consume, et cetera, in many digital contexts. And given, at least in the US, how much is dependent on digital spaces, this becomes really, really, really important. So, for example, I'll mention some examples that have been in the news. There is one of the areas where this comes to the front is facial recognition technology. So facial recognition technology, anything from using this, I don't know if you guys can see it. This is my phone. Anything from the phone when you log in and it's supposed to scan your face to, sometimes getting on planes, sometimes getting into venues for concerts or whatnot. It's facial recognition technology is all over the place. Well, there has been some research that shows that facial recognition technology doesn't pick up on Black and brown faces nearly as well as white faces, and will not recognize, even if this recognition is supposed to recognize you so you can get in somewhere. There are even some places, where you're supposed to get scanned to just get into your home. If you're living in a place like a residential area it won't recognize you. And that causes issues. And why has that happened? Well, in terms of the development of this technology, when it was first developed, there's this, you have to write these programs, which are these algorithms using information that it's scanning in. And then it has to be trained on data. In the case of data, it's going to be a bunch of photos. The people who have developed those tended to be white males, tended to be Asian males. And the photos that were used often were of white males or Asian males. And so the technology has learned very, very well how to recognize and distinguish between white males. And so it does, in terms of the error rates, it's very, very low error rates. It's very good at recognizing white male faces. But it does a little bit worse with female faces. And it does a little worse with non-white faces. And in terms of the category that it has the worst recognition rate, it's going to be dark skin. And it's going to be, if you happen to be female, that has the worst. So dark skinned females is the worst category, about a 34% error rate.
Wow.
So anything that deviates, quote unquote, deviates from a white male face, it gets worse and worse and worse, right? And so it has a real impact. Some people might like, okay, so what? But there have been cases where it's had real impact. For example, there was a man in Detroit who was wrongly accused of breaking in and stealing jewelry from a jewelry store because a facial recognition technology, an algorithm, had identified him somehow as the person who broke in based on some security video, and that he was completely innocent. But it didn't matter because the police department used that and said, "Oh, the algorithm identified this guy." They went and arrested him. They put him in jail, even though he had an alibi, and he lost his job temporarily because of that. Another example is this was in a different report where took a facial recognition software and ran through it the faces of members of Congress, Black members of Congress who were part of the Black Congressional Black Caucus. That's what I'm trying to say. And this software identified a number of members of Congress as criminals because it couldn't distinguish. So this is just one of many examples that are out there where you have algorithms that are doing this. Now, it's important to say I genuinely do not believe that companies are intentionally trying to be biased. They're not. I don't think they're genuinely trying to be biased. I think this is more about traditional ways that these models, because it's based on mathematical models, have been developed, and then it forms how these things are designed. And I think it also is truly about companies not even thinking about this. If you're not even thinking about this, then you can't debug your software, so to speak, or your algorithms to check to make sure that it doesn't do that. And then, so only now is there just beginning to be attention about this. Wow. And only now is just beginning to be maybe some solutions. We're barely scratching the surface on how to fix this.
Wow. 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 This is very interesting to me, because most of the time people trust technology.
Yes, they do.
And what you're saying is powerful, because what you're saying is technology makes errors too. They get it wrong sometimes.
Yes, yes, yes. There's actually a psychological term for it, which is it's called machine bias, where it's psychologically shown in some research that people in many ways will automatically trust that the machine is right without question, because that's how we view machines, that they're objective, unemotional. They're not going to make those kind of mistakes. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Now, in this work that you're doing, I'm sure that there has to be at least one person that has made a tremendous impact on you. So who would that person be?
In terms of this research area, I would say some scholars that have come before me. So I mentioned Timnit Gebru. She has a PhD. She's not in academia, but she's done some tremendous work. There's another, many of them are Black women. Timnit is a Black woman. Joy Buolamwini, another scholar, is a Black woman. Deborah Raji, another. Sophia Noble. These are all people who have put out work from multiple disciplines, by the way, not just quantitative disciplines, but have put out work before me that has started to draw attention to this. I would also say other scholars before them who didn't focus specifically on algorithmic fairness and bias, but on discrimination in the marketplace. So these are marketing scholars. So people like David Crockett, Sonia Greer, Jerome Williams. These are people who came before me, Vanessa Perry, Jerry Henderson. These numbers are coming up, who've done tremendous work in scholarship on how discrimination can arise in marketplace contexts and what kind of impact it has on consumers.
Wow. What is one thing you wish you would have known earlier in your career?
In my academic career, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I wish I had known earlier how important networks are. It's funny, I came into academia from a corporate environment where anybody who's worked in corporate environments know it's political. I came in academia thinking, oh, it's not going to be so political. And boy, was I wrong. I think academia is even more political. So I wish I had had a better understanding of that. I don't think it would have changed anything. I would have still pursued it, but I would have had that in mind in terms of everything I've done leading up to it. And that would have been great to figure out early mentors for that reason, who can help navigate that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm thinking, oh, I'm smart enough. I can do it all by myself. I don't really need a network, but in honesty, you really do. It just helps.
You really do.
It helps the work seem more manageable because other people have done it and they can just help guide you through some of these things you may not be sure of.
Absolutely. Yeah. I call it water cooler talk.
Yeah, most definitely. What would you say has been your biggest challenge academically, and what did you learn from it?
I would say my biggest challenge academically related to research is exactly the kind of work that I'm doing. This is a new space in marketing, a new space in many disciplines. It's also considered controversial, so being as somebody who's new to academia, untenured, and coming to the field with something that is a new space that also gets politicized, whether you like it or not. Because for me, this is just facts. Like, hey, this algorithm is producing different outcomes. Can we make it so that it's not producing different outcomes for people who are equally qualified? That should be not controversial, but it's controversial nonetheless. I think that's been the biggest challenge, getting through and putting out research and based on facts and science that has that perspective.
And I just wonder, would the response be different if you were a white woman talking about fairness and bias in algorithms? I just wonder, would it be better received or not?
It's a good question. And it's hard to say at this point.
Yeah, it's so new, but we'll see. We'll continue to communicate with you to kind of stay abreast on how this thing is going and how much pushback you're getting and where you are being well received and welcomed about this research that you're doing. It's going to be interesting, especially big companies, big tech companies that relates to consumers and markets and marketing.
Yes.
I'm all in. I'm fully invested. I am interested in this. I have been sold. You have sold me.
I'm pleased to hear that. That's my biggest joy is just letting people know about it so they're aware. I think that's one of the biggest things we could do. Just spread the word.
So we've talked about challenges. What is your most exciting, your most proud moment?
Within my personally or professionally?
Either way.
Certainly my personal proudest moment is having my daughter. She is my joy. She's my heart walking outside my chest. And she right now, I said earlier she's 10, but she would correct me and say she's 10 and a half. So I better get straight. Marrying my husband, who's been wonderful. Marriage has been great. So those are my proudest things. Personally, professionally, getting those 3 letters, PhD. That was some serious. I've never worked hard in my life.
Yeah,
I thought I had worked hard before getting the PhD, but getting that PhD, it's you put in blood, sweat, and tears. Once you get it, nobody can take it away from you. If anything else, nobody can take it away from you. So that was one of my proudest moments, professionally.
And they better be careful, because when we talk about fighting, nobody knows how to fight like a doc student. So when you go into a new space, it's like second nature. Like this is my point. This is my stance, and I stick by it strongly.
Yes. That's when you've earned your stripes, when you're not intimidated by the other PhDs in the room. And you're like, no, this is my space. This is my expertise. I know what I'm talking about, so.
Yeah. Most definitely. If you were granted one wish, what would that wish be?
Ooh, that's a great question. If I was granted one wish, what would that wish be? I'm thinking again, professionally speaking. I would want to have a huge pot of money so that, because I really love what I'm doing, so I wouldn't change jobs, but a huge pot of money so that I can create like this thing where there's a research institution around this topic. I wouldn't diverge from this topic. I think it's important to society. That people need to know, especially people that look like us, and that we need to put solutions to it. So, but that would decouple me from the worry about tenure and having a job and all that stuff, so that no longer becomes a distraction. Worry about publishing in the right journals, because in some kind of think tank or institution or something, we just keep putting out the work and making sure it gets disseminated, and making sure that it gets in front of people, who are decision makers or who need to know, without worrying about all those things.
That's a whole other conversation you just said about submitting in the right journals versus putting in the journals that will somehow validate you as credible, right? Oh God, I'm not even gonna go there.
Yes, we should have a sidebar conversation about that.
And now I'll ask this next question, and I think about your daughter. What legacy do you want to leave?
I certainly, for her, want her to feel like her voice matters, that she is worthwhile in any space, that she is intelligent, she is bright, that she is capable, so that she's not in any space where feels intimidated just because of her gender and her race.
Yeah, most definitely. I think you're definitely doing that already. So
I hope so. Do what my mama did for me.
Yeah, most definitely. It was already modeled for you, so you're just passing it along.
That's what I'm doing. So
here we are. You're at the university, you're teaching, you're doing research. What's next?
More of the same.
Look, tenure.
That's the goal right now. Trying to get tenure, or even more so, just focused on doing the research, putting out the work, so that I'm tenurable anywhere.
Yeah.
Whether it's my current institution or any other, that's been the focus. Putting out a body of work around algorithms, fairness, and bias, so that there's a body of work where I'm tenurable anywhere.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And then the contract work will just come in. So you'll be like, I can only take one class this semester. I just got a lot going on. People are calling me. That's the hope.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. So I know that you are fairly new with the Black Doctoral Network. So just talk a little bit about what you expect, what you're excited for about being a member with BDN.
Well, first of all, I'm excited that it's BDN, that it's Black Doctoral Network. There are not many of us in any discipline. And so finding other people and networking with other people who look like me, but also understand the rigors, the trials and tribulations, the joys of being in doctoral spaces, whether it's in academia, whether it's in other spaces, but coming in, leaning in with that, I think is really important. So many of us are the only one in our group or institution. So being able to connect with others, even if it's not in my institution, I think is exciting, not only professionally, but psychologically, sociologically. So for me, and I'm hoping also by doing that, that I can, in connecting with others, we talked about networking, and how important it is, that there might be ways to collaborate in different ways that I can't even begin to think of,
Yeah.
So that's what my greatest hope is by being part of BDN.
Yeah. Well, we are so excited to have individuals like you. I love what I call Black academics. You're intelligent, powerful, and really putting in work to make a difference. So thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a very informative interview for me, but also very exciting about the work that you're doing and what you're trying to do to make a difference as it relates to fairness and getting rid of all this bias, even in spaces as it relates to technology and algorithms and all that stuff. So thank you for taking time out, Dr. Ukanwa. Where can our viewers and our listeners go to learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
Well, first of all, Dr. Holmes, thank you again for this opportunity. This has been a real pleasure talking with you about all these themes. Where people can find me, there's 3 places: Twitter, my handle's at Kalinda Ukanwa, so at Kalinda, from her first name, Ukanwa. You can also find me on LinkedIn, search for that same name. And finally, I have a website, which is www.kalindaukanwa.com.
Well, listen, she's giving you the information. I will be going after this interview to follow my new friend on all of her social media platforms. And while you're following her, I want you to stop on by and also follow BDN. We would love to have you connect with us so we can interact and exchange great ideas together. Well, this has been another great interview. Again, thank you, Dr. Ukanwa, for joining me. Guys, join me again next time for another episode of the Black Doctors Talk podcast. But until then, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And until then, guys, be safe, have a blessed day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.